Many words.
Yeah, I reckon we'll send it to the cloud. All right. Good morning, everybody. For those who I haven't met or haven't met me before, my name is Ricardo Ignacio, and I'm one of the co-chairs of the TDG. I'm going to be your host, your chair for today's meeting. Before we get into the detail of today's agenda, I'd like to begin by doing an acknowledgement of country. So we acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we all gather today. We pay our respect to elders past, present, and emerging, and extend our respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. We acknowledge the first peoples as the first scientists, educators, and healers. So this is the agenda for today's meeting. So as we usually do, so we'll go through some usual business and updates. Then we'll have a Spark testing event report back from Steve Swimsberg. After that, we will spend some time continuing the series of walkthrough of profiles, and we'll focus on the AUPS bundle with Danielle. We'll then move on to the AUPS conformance proposal from which will be presented and hosted by Heath. We'll finalize with the use case feedback with Shelley, and then we'll talk about what's coming next. Just a quick reminder, you would have all seen this slide in previous meetings. So this is what's currently in scope of the AU Patient Summary Release 1. So you can see all the profiles we've been working through and that we're planning to take through ballot, and as previously requested, and as we go through this process, preparation for ballot, any help you can give to make sure that the content is as good as it can be would be much appreciated. So as you review the content, if you can look for things that don't or might not look right for you, any bugs, anything like that, just flag them, because our main goal is just to ensure this gets to a ballot as in as good shape as it can be. Another slide that you would have seen before, again, just a very high-level view of the timelines we're working to. So we currently approaching the ballot for comment period, which will run from the 11th of August till the 7th of September. And between now and then, it's really a big focus for us to ensure that we take this specification to a level that's as good as it can be. So it's really, we're on the finish line to get to that ballot for comment period. So yeah, just a reminder to see where we're all sitting in this journey.
Not sure if you can see you, Danielle.
Yeah, I just wanted to call out, this slide has changed a bit. In between the last call we had and this one, we've got the official advice from HL7AU on their needs for things. So we were originally planning to publish our ballot for comment snapshot on the 9th of August, which gave us that kind of 8th of August meeting to talk about some things. But that needs to be brought forward. We've been advised we need to publish on the 4th of August. So we're going to be squishing more topics into the previous meetings. So there's a little bit of change to the original topics that we had to try to account for getting through, I guess, the more substantive items before the ballot for comment deadline there.
for that, Danielle. So another reminder that if you want to vote in the AUPS ballot, you should register, and details that are available here in the screen. So this has been kind of shared previously. I think anything has really changed. So if you want to vote, just make sure that you register and make sure that you do that between the 6th of July and the 3rd of August. There's a few kind of preconditions in here for you to be able to vote. But again, this is not new information. Something's been shared previously. I'll now go through the approval of minutes, which we've sent out last week. I'll just try to get them open here on my screen, and I'll just quickly scroll through them. Just if I can share the. Here you go. All right. So, as I said, so the meetings have been shared previously. There is a so the link is in the presentation, and what I'm just going to ask before we move on to accepting the minutes is, did anyone have any concerns, or did anyone have any comments they wanted to make on these minutes that have been sent out? Is there anything anyone wants to flag? I can't see hands, so if you want to raise something, just please speak up. Can't hear anything. So I'd like to then propose we put forward a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting. So does someone want to submit a motion for that?
Yes, Stephen moves to approve.
Thanks, Stephen. Do I have a second?
I can second it, Marvin.
Thanks, Marvin. I'll now launch the poll. There you go. So hopefully you can all see it. If you're not able to submit your vote, just please drop your preferred voting in the chat, and we'll just count it towards the final numbers. Yeah. I think we have pretty much everybody in the call represented in the numbers here. So I'll now just stop the poll, and before I do that, I'm just going to count the numbers. So we have 16 affirmative and 7 abstain. So the motion is passed. Okay. Let me now go back to share my screen. Okay. All right. So there's some updates and news here on the. Oh, sorry. I actually just want to make sure that we have all the actions
There's a few across a few meetings. That one I've not done yet, so I've
Yep.
not changed. There's an action on me to incorporate editorially some references off to base. I'll get to it. It's not done yet. I think we can report on actions officially in a later meeting.
Okay. So we might just do a stock take of everything that's open and do that.
There's a couple
Yeah.
of actions on me. I'm happy to roll over, but
Yeah, let's roll over. I'll
keeping in
present those
mind
on
that,
your behalf if you're away.
yeah, that'll be good. So I've reported back in the Jurek in the confluence pages. So
Yep. Okay. Thank you. Some further updates and news here on the screen. So there's some work currently underway to finalize the IPS 2.0 ballot reconciliation. So the current goal is to have this work completed by the 16th of July. So not sure if Heath, you want to add anything on this one, or Danielle, for people to know about. And the other one was the AU Core. There's 2 items out for electronic vote. I think you sent this one out, Danielle, just in the last couple of days.
I did, but I'll put it in the chat. So I'll just speak to the AU Core one, because that's relevant to us because we inherit the requirements from AU Core. So AU Core is moving to clarify which parts of those elements must support. I think you need to go back one slide, Ricardo.
Oh, sorry.
No worries. And so they've got an e-vote out for a proposal and what that is, and we would inherit it in patient summary. So it's relevant that we kind of bring people's attention to this e-vote. And please feel free to consider that and provide your opinion on it, because core should work for almost all use cases. So if it's not working in your opinion for patient summary, please provide the feedback. Or if you're quite comfortable that the must support requirements proposed from core are totally fine for us to inherit, please vote approve.
And any update on the IPS?
Heath or Stephen might be able to give a better summary. I mean, I'm happy to give a go, but as far as I understand it, the goal, as far as I knew, it was 16th of July. Let's finish making decisions about it. And then that has to go through changes and through into publication and through the patient care group. And I edited this one. So I've been looking at these issues that are coming as kind of 3 sorts of types of things. There's a bunch of guidance and additional pages, which will include things like potentially a mapping back to ISO 27269, which is the requirement spec for IPS. We'll include some content around examples. We'll clarify some of the guidance and a whole bunch of things like that. There's also some tickets that are about conformance in which resources get supported. In particular, the 2 that I noted that were still outstanding was the proposal that device use statement shouldn't necessarily have my support on it, and to add in immunization recommendation into the care plans section as a recognized way to represent that information. So those haven't been voted on yet, but we would inherit whatever those decisions are. So I thought it was worth calling out here.
I can quickly report back that the device use statement is no longer going to be removed as must support, but still needs to be voted on because this is a ballot response, so it will be voted on as part of an e-vote. Basically the 16th of July is when they're going to lock down things. So any further suggestions or recommendations, in particular around the obligations that have been added to the IPS, should be raised before the middle of July so that they can be considered as part, keeping in mind that this is actually just going to go to publication. It is not going to be balloted again. So this is basically the final 2.00. So anything in there that you see is not up to implementation for those that are implementing IPS directly. And obviously from this entire group, we are inheriting. So it's really important that if you get a chance, have a look.
I'd also like to say that next Friday then, which is one of the conformance sessions, I think we're going to have to talk through those outstanding items that have been noted as things that we are concerned about inheriting from IPS so that we can ensure that we have raised those concerns in a way that works with their timeline. I know we have already got some in place that have come out of these sessions and the conformance sessions, but I think we should talk about that at the next AUPS conformance session, which is next Friday.
I have no additional comments on this to add, except that I was in discussions with the IPS project leads and on the questions of adding some clinical safety statement sections into the IPS 2.0.0. That I'm not sure when it will be actioned, but I assume that it will be actioned before it goes to publication, and the AU IPS might want to take a look at that as well.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thanks for the discussion. We'll move on to the next item in our agenda for today. So it's a Spark test event report back, and then we'll have Steve sharing some of the insights from the event with us. So over to you, Steve. Do you want me to click through the slides, or do you want to take control of the presentation?
I'll just click through. That'd be great. Thanks, Ricardo.
No worries.
Cheers. Okay, so for those of you who were at the TDG yesterday, this may be a little bit repetitive, but there are some definite differences for patient summary. So we had 37 participants across 13 different vendor organizations, and for patient summary, we had 7 different systems connecting with each other and providing test evidence, which was spanning a really wide set of real-world use cases. So some of those use cases were around GP systems, prescription wallets, patient flow and patient story, goals, unplanned care events, FHIR facade APIs, and also consolidated views over My Health Record. We did use a whole stack of different testing tools on the day. So the Inferno test suite we used for conformance checks, the data sets from HL7 Australia, the test data sets from HL7 Australia. Vendors had their own test data, especially for patient summary data. We had feature files across the patient summary implementation guide. The Spark server was used as a shared data source for fetching some data, and also the HL7AU terminology server for code validation and lookup. So overall, a really wide set of use cases and different testing tools being used to get some good coverage. And so testing the real world interoperability, but also the spec conformance. Next slide, please. So for patient summary in particular, connectivity was one of the aims. We were talking about being able to generate and exchange a patient summary for each of the vendor's own use cases. So we did have a couple of those happening. So we had Team Unicorn doing a demonstration of using patient summary, getting the data from Halo Connect, and that was to perform clinical decision support. We had Alexa demonstrating the Scripty app, which was retrieving patient summary data from Halo Connect, Best Practice, and ADHA. And we had ADHA themselves demonstrating some named query implementations for creating patient summaries, and Alcidian demonstrating the patient summary validation using the Spark Inferno test suite. And there are a couple of challenges with that, so we got some info about that. Next one, please, mate. Thanks. So a big thank you to the vendors who have submitted the test results so far. We're still crunching the numbers on this, but we have info coming through from Best Practice, Alcidion, Sonic Healthcare, OEXA, CSIRO, and the Australian Digital Health Agency. A reminder that if you do have other test data, test results, you can send those through offline, and we can update the coverage reports. We can take them at any time. And also, if you do that, or if you've contributed any test evidence, please send your logo through to Sparked, and we can promote your organisation. Next one. So again, similar to TDG, we did have a number of FHIR resources that were not yet profiled in AU Patient Summary or even IPS that systems were testing with on the day. So some of these FHIR resources were appointment, communication, binary, schedule, slot, goal, provenance, and device. We have spoken in the past briefly around some of these ending up in a future version of a patient summary. So, for example, device, that is part of IPS. And yesterday at the AU Core TDG, we discussed appointment in particular. So I guess don't forget that we do have a feedback process for getting resources or profiles that you might be needing into the discussion process and then potentially into an IG. So that happens through Confluence and Jira, and also within these workgroup meetings where you can raise those requirements or gaps. Would anyone like to talk more around those particular resources, or are we happy to move on?
I think given the time for ballot for comment, we should probably pop on and I think we can pick up some of the testing things out of the connectathon, the next one, because that's coming up in September.
Yep, no probs. Okay, so as I mentioned, sorry, Ricardo, if you just go to the next slide, please. Yep. So the exact numbers on test coverage, that's still in progress, and I'll be doing a report back on that at the next workgroup meeting, just to show where we're at in terms of coverage across the different profiles that we've got in patient summary. But that's me. Thanks.
Thanks, Steve. Great update. All right. Now we're at the profile walkthroughs item, and I think Danielle, you're going to take us through the AUPS bundle. So again, do you want me to share my screen, or do you want to take control of the sharing? Just let me know.
Yeah, I think I should share at this point. I think that will be a lot easier. Otherwise, I'll be doing a lot of scroll up, scroll down.
Over to you then. Thank you.
All right. So share screen. We were originally going to talk about this last meeting, and instead we spent, I think, what I thought was quite valuable talking through FHIR documents and some really of the context of what we're trying to do in Australia and what we're inheriting, and how does this actually work in terms of overall an Australian patient summary that would work as an IPS when people are traveling, with the idea that kind of sets us up now that to go have a look at our particular profile and have a look at what is in there and why, but also to identify maybe whether or not there are things that were discussed or are of relevance that aren't yet in there. And so I'm going to basically do just quickly the recap for this and then go straight into the profile. So this is what we've been asking people to do, is have a look at the profiles and to bring questions, thoughts, etc. Where we're up to now, and we've skipped over procedure and encounter and composition to go to bundle, because we're coming into the pointy end of getting to an initial ballot for comment, which is where we put out a position that provides direction on where we think Australian patient summary is going to get that wider community feedback. And also through the last meeting, we agreed that we would add patient summary smoking status and pathology result observation. Those are in now, but we haven't yet done the walkthroughs for them. So that's later on. So today is all about our bundle. So quick reminder that we have a set of design principles for profiles. These particular profile design principles are about meeting our initial agreements that an Australian patient summary shall conform to both IPS and AU core, basically. Latest core, latest IPS. And so we've been carrying these forward on what we think that means, that resources provided in a patient summary shall validate against both the IPS and AU core profile. And we have decided to ensure that would happen by having an AUPS profile where both are available, and that resources shall validate reference elements against AUPS profile. So again, that's telling us what we're going to do in our AUPS profile. And that when we're designing our profile, we're going to be adopting the AU core value sets in preference over the IPS value sets, because the terminology in AU core inherits that localization through the clinical reference sets and the work through AU CDI around what is recognized in Australia as the more appropriate set within our circumstance. So that's just a quick refresh. I'm going to ignore this one because it's not actually relevant for bundle. And let's go straight to the bundle. So I'm going to make that a tiny bit. Or is that big enough? Or should I go a little bit bigger for people?
I think it's good enough.
That's good.
All right. So we start with bundle. We are not inheriting from IPS bundle. None of our profiles inherit from IPS at the moment. We are declaring we're compliant. And there is a bundle constraint here right at the top. And let me just show that to you here. And this is really quite interesting. This is a bit different. That to be a valid IPS document, you must have no additional compositions besides the first one. So that's what you can have. You can't have more than one composition. There's been a few questions around what would that mean if I was trying to actually represent in more detail a set of content that was actually drawn from multiple documents and I wanted to include those in their FHIR documents, or if I was trying to satisfy this through GP to GP. And I think we're in general understanding that what you can do is actually reference bundles of bundles if you really need to do that. But from an IPS perspective, this is what you're allowed to do, is that have that just that one composition, and composition is first. And it has to be first according to the FHIR document requirements that we ran through in the last call. Coming back up, bundle identifier is mandatory. We ran through in the last call what that means. What is a bundle identifier, but that is required. Type is also mandatory. And in this case, it's fixed document because this is a FHIR document. We do inherit this and that identifier mandatoriness essentially from IPS. Timestamp is mandatory. We inherit that from IPS, but really we're inheriting it from the FHIR document requirements, since a patient summary is a document. I'll probably just pause here and say, I'm going to do this run through, but if anyone has any questions or anything they want to go into more detail of, please pop your hand up and we can focus in on that aspect.
Daniel,
according
with regard to the question of GP to GP record transfer, I did have a conversation with Peter Jordan at the Connectathon about GP to GP record transfer. my comment to him is that if you are transferring GP to GP record, you are actually transferring the whole lot of patient EMR data and not summary data. And perhaps IPS is not the suitable vehicle for GP to GP record transfer. So we didn't really come to a resolution as to sort of what are the alternatives, but that's the thing that I said to Peter Jordan, and he didn't have a strong pushback on that. I think that's something that we also need to consider as to whether or not the AU patient summary is actually the vehicle for GP to GP record transfer.
And I agree. Yeah, I agree with what you've said, Stephen. It's not the natural vehicle for it, because it is meant to be a summary.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that using sort of a bundle is actually the good way to doing it.
Sorry, Sinclair? So going past identifier type and timestamp, we talked about those in more detail last fortnight. Coming into entry, you might be surprised to see that for entry, the minimum is 2, but you will note there are 3 mandatory sections in composition. This is intentional. It is allowed to send those sections with empty reasons. So the minimum set of resource entries for a patient summary document is 2, a composition and a patient. I'm a bit iffy on this 2, given that you have to have an author. We can talk through that later on around what this is implying, but at the moment we're inheriting that cardinality from IPS, which is you have to have at least 2. Those 2 are composition and patient. Excuse me. Now, the entry is sliced. The entry is sliced, and this is providing direction. Some of these will enforce our rules and some won't. There's some limitations in what slicing can do. What the intention for slicing the entries is providing the direction on what your profiles are that are relevant. So as we come down, some of these are even not profiled. So there's just device here. There's also, if we come down to things like clinical impression, which is mentioned in, there's an IPS section. I don't remember it off the top of my head. Does anybody? Which section that's in?
Which one?
Clinical impression.
No.
Is that also in the medical problem or clinical in the problem section?
I don't think so, but I guess even though I don't remember it, and care plan is in the care planning section, that there are these resources called
Functional
out
status.
somewhere. Functional status. That's where it is. Okay. And so one of the things that the bundle profile does is provide almost this like index for implementers to go, well, what resources are called out that are relevant, and then what is their baseline profile I need to conform against. Obviously, that's a slightly different question for observation because there are multiple observation profiles, but for all the other resource types, there's only one. Sometimes it's just the basic FHIR because it's not profiled by IPS or AU Core. Sometimes it's IPS because AU Core has no profile. So we have, at this point in time, no Australian requirements. We may choose to add them, in which case we would have an AU patient summary profile. But right now, we're just directly referencing the IPS profile. Similarly, here we've got an AU Core location profile. And here we've got like AU Core body temperature vitals because there's no equivalent IPS profile, and there's no need identified at the moment to do any further profiling for a patient summary context. But then we have all the ones which are actually AU patient summary profiles, which are meeting those profile designs. So that's largely what the bundle does, is it both identifies all of those and it ensures conformance. There's a bit of a difference here with AU patient summaries bundle and how its slicing behaves versus IPS. And I was really pleased that at the last testing event that this worked really successfully for actually all the patient summary participants. One of our requirements is to ensure that patient summaries conform to both the IPS and the AU core profiles. So how this slice is split up is that we do this by type resource. So we say, if you're a composition and you can only have one, you have to conform to that. If it's a patient, it conforms to this. You can have 0 to many allergy intolerance, but everyone you supply has to conform to AU patient summary allergy intolerance. And we've already done the walkthrough to confirm that that will enforce conformance to the IPS profile and the core profile. And as you go down the list, same thing. So if you're a condition resource and you don't have to supply any, you need to conform to the AU patient summary condition profile. And so that's what this slicing does until we get to observation, because there's more than one resource here, one resource target type. There's no single baseline like patient summary observation profile. We could do one, which would really just reference things like what is minimum and what is must support. I think it has some value for scenarios in validation, but I think what is listed here is taking into account two things. It's taking into account the list of recognized valid profiles, and it's also allowing especially that extensibility, because IPS and Australian Patient Summary allow for people to define additional sections. And so it's really important that we don't know what those are. We don't know all the observations that people might want to supply. And so we can't restrict it to just this set of observations. We have to allow for just the observation profile, like the straight fire resource there, which would enable validation for those previously undefined sections. I'll just pause there to double check. Did everyone follow that on why this one allows the fire observation? Would you like me to give some examples or go into more detail?
I'm cool with that. I think it was good breakdown.
All right. So at the moment, for every other resource type, we don't list multiples. It's only observation. We may find ourselves in the future where we actually have multiple profiles that we think are worth listing, or where we identify a profile type that shouldn't be restricted this way. It's obviously not relevant, I think, for things like patients or organizations. There's some really basic minimum requirements that go everywhere. But we might find it that we have a need to open up some of these other slices. Now, that's all that's in this bundle profile at this point in time. Now, we spoke last fortnight around the ability to do signatures. And in fact, if I go to the bundle resource in and of itself, there's a number of things we've spoken about as being potentially relevant as we come through. There's way more elements here. And in particular, we've spoken about signatures as being potentially relevant. So I think that could be a future case for us to look at some support requirements around it. It's not set now because it's not set as must support in IPS. But this might be a ballot for comment kind of suggestion, I think. So that's really all I wanted to run through around what this profile is doing. It is, oh, and the other thing actually I'll run through, because you might go, well, why is this must support and not the others? This is must support for 2 reasons. One is that although the bundle is the container and defines the FHIR document rules, which sections are mandatory, what do you have to do with empty reason or the rest of it is fully handled by the composition profile. We'll get into that next call. And it's the one that will say whether or not, oh, it's not actually in here because we're not showing it, but it's in IPS. So it'll be in there soon. Around which sections shall require to populate or shall display, or those kinds of things, which are shoulds, which are mays, all gets handled by composition. So we don't want to duplicate that back here. Or rather, IPS, the IPS has not wanted to. I think that's a reasonable position. So it's not duplicated here. Theoretically, we could, but it does actually get quite difficult since it's really actually doing it on a section by section basis. And you could have different must support obligations on allergy intolerance resources, depending on whether the section was mandatory or if someone else is defining some other kind of section. So it does make sense to me that it's really these just 2 mandatory ones that we are flagging as must support. And then you have to look inside the composition for which ones are set by AU patient summary. And in fact, then your own downstream IG for your own use case, if you're doing aged care or other things around what you're saying is necessary for your use case. And that drives the population and support here. So that's what it looks like at the moment. Any questions around this? All right, I'm going to hand over.
Danielle, I just threw
sorry.
one in the. That's right. I just threw one in the chat just because I guess I'm looking in the future as well. How many, the health data covers a wide spectrum. Is this going to be just a GP physical health as well, or do you think it'll extend into mental health and psychological health areas?
Well, I think, okay. To a degree, I mean, your question isn't really about profiling at a bundle level. I think you're more asking a very high level question of how should patient summaries be supported and implemented across Australia. Part of that has to go to the people who want to use it and whether or not they think this is appropriate. Some of that's in the clinical design group and some of that would be with government policy around how this is supported. I mean, it could. There's absolutely nothing to say that this could not be a means to share a summary of a patient's record for those use cases. But I think it's a separate conversation to today.
So the way that IPS is defined is that it's for cross-border unplanned care and continuity of care. Full stop.
All care. Yep. Thanks.
No worries. I'll stop sharing there. So that's the quick rundown of the bundle profile, so you know what it's supposed to be doing. And I guess some of those things on why the rules are currently in there and where we might want to extend through ballot for comment. I'll hand back to Ricardo.
Thanks for that, Danielle. We'll just move on to share my screen again. So give me just a second. Okay.
Is it up to me? Do you want me to just share mine?
Yep. So that's the next item on the agenda, is the conformance proposal. So if you want to share, you can do it.
Yeah, I
Otherwise,
might
I'm
take
happy.
over if that's
Yep.
right.
Yep.
Okay. You can
Yep.
see my screen. Yep.
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so I'm looking at putting forward a proposal for the conformance requirements of AU patient summary. So as Danielle alluded to, we've been going through a lot of sessions around on Fridays, Conformance Fridays, as they've been dubbed for the last couple of years. In particular, this one's about AU patient summary. So we've had 5 sessions so far over the last 9 weeks. Got another session next week, and I can see that Danielle has planned another 4 sessions after that. That goes into August, September. So I've only got the 6 sessions here. If you want a summary of those, you want to have a look at any of the videos that are recorded or the notes, that you can go to this link at the bottom there on the wiki. So the goal of these sessions have been to primarily in the middle, other than just taking some people along for the ride around what is FHIR conformance and understanding what our getting a collective understanding of what our requirements are for patient summary, was to prepare this proposal that I'm presenting today. So today is the beginning of, it's not the whole proposal, but it is part of what we have been talking at these meetings. As an outcome of these sessions, we've also been identifying and proposing changes back in AU Core, and in particular FHIR IPS IGs, and I've been representing the SMART project as part of IPS at the weekly calls, etc., and feeding back a lot of our requirements and commentary around the application of obligations into the IPS via profiles. As we know, we agreed on some design principles for patient summary back in December last year in Melbourne, which are these 3 principles, but the main one that I wanted to point out was number 1, which is that we are going to, we wanted to basically make sure that our AU patient summary profiles validate against both IPS and AU core profiles. So to do that, we've gone through another set of elaboration on those principles through the conformance sessions, and have got another 4 principles that elaborate on that further. These principles we're not looking to publish as part of the IG, they're just for guidance as part of development of the IG itself. So the first one is that all must support elements in the AU-PS profiles will, where applicable, have conformance obligations that satisfy the IPS profile expectations for the corresponding producer and consumer actors. So I'll go into a little bit more about what producer and consumer actors are in a moment, but basically these are actor definitions that have been defined by IPS. And what we're saying here is that we will use the obligations, or we will inherit those obligations from the IPS profiles in our AUPS profiles. I'll just make sure that I can see. So just bear with me for a second. Make sure I can see what people are saying. There we go. Second one is that AUPS profiles can strengthen the IPS profile obligations, either by choosing a more specialized obligation or added an additional obligation. And this is all sounding pretty high level at the moment, or perhaps a little bit, for those that are perhaps haven't gone through the ride around what are obligations in AU Core, etc., but I will go into that a little bit further. So what we're basically saying is here, the first one is we're going to inherit AUPS obligations, but in AUPS, we may choose to make them stronger. And if there is no profile in IPS, or if there is an element in IPS that we have made must support, then we will derive those from, this one is, any downstream implementation guides from AUPS can also strengthen those further. So as an example, if the My Health record wants to start with our AUPS profile and make it stronger for a particular profile for the My Health record, they can choose to make that stronger as well. And number 4 is one and 4 are the key ones really for this group. Number 4 is that we are going to start with, as a default, where a profile doesn't exist in IPS, or there is an element that we have made must support within either AU Core that's not in IPS, or within AUPS, which I don't think we've got any examples of that yet. We will basically start with a default set of obligations of shall populate if known for a producer, and shall handle and should display for AUPS consumer. Now, those defaults are the defaults of IPS, and hence why we are using those as our default obligations for AUPS. So for those that have been on the ride with us in Core, there are we have used populate if known throughout AU Core, and we've got a couple of extra obligations here that we're talking about on consumers in particular, that are shall handle and shall display. So in AU Core, we've used shall no error, which has got a fairly low bar. It just means that you shouldn't fall over and die if you receive something. But now we're actually saying you shall handle the meaning of this element correctly. And as I indicated, this is inherited based on those principles earlier that I was talking about from IPS. So what does this mean? Basically, it's saying that an application that ignores an element that is shall handle is non-conformant to this profile. So effectively, when the resource or information in it is processed, the consequences of the elements are considered. So you don't necessarily need to store it or process it. You just need to consider the consequences of doing so. All right, so that's the intent of shall handle obligation. The third one here is should display, and here we're saying that you should display the value of the element if you're presenting it to a human user, and that's just to ensure that a human looking at the content is aware of this particular value. So any viewer of an AUPS should display any must support element. So any commentary or questions on these principles? Any objections to these principles? And if you want to comment after, out of band because you're a bit shy today, you're welcome to go to this page and comment there, and we will certainly consider your feedback after the fact. Danielle, you're off mute.
Yeah, I think it was, I mean, I'm in favor of it. I mean, I've been part of the conformance sessions for the last like 4 or 5 calls or whatever we've had. And I think this is a really good starting point. I think it's potentially worth commenting for those people who haven't been able to make it to those 4 or 5 calls that points 1 to 3 are givens. We can't not do points 1 to 3. They're a nice, succinct explanation of our obligations of being a localized kind of IPS, basically, and that we have to do those. And also FHIR's rules around obligations, that anything that goes downstream can't undo what the upstream specification has said. They're just profiles on top of something if they're going to claim conformance to it. So, yeah, I think this is, I mean, yes, I'm quite in favour of it.
Yeah, I might move on unless there's some other commentary. So because we're not including it as part of the IG, I don't know that we're looking for a motion today, but so these are, I guess, can be commented on. If we need to change them, we can consider that going forward as a set of principles. Okay, so next we're going to look at actor definitions for a UPS. And we've defined 2 actors, and the first actor that we've proposing is an actor called a UPS producer, where an AUPS producer is a system that creates or assembles an AUPS bundle, which we've just had a demonstration of, through the automated generation or human curation of the patient summary content. This actor is based on the producer IPS actor. That's the IPS defined actor definition for a producer, and describes the additional requirements and documentation applied for the Australian context. And the second is an AUPS consumer, which is very similar, other than the fact that it's the system that is consuming an AUPS bundle and uses it to display or process patient summary content. And again, this is based on the consumer IPS actor and describes the additional requirements and documentation applied for the Australian context. Again, these are on a wiki page down the bottom there if you want to comment on any of these definitions. But basically, what we're asking the group today is the intent of these actor definitions clear enough for us to go to ballot with. We're not really looking to wordsmith these definitions today. We are open to taking your commentary over the next week so that we can review it next week on the wiki page. You can leave comments there, suggested changes, but ultimately we're looking probably address most of this through ballot for comment. So in that case, I'm wondering if we would like to, well, before we, any commentary first, I guess, and then we'll looking to entertain a motion to accept these as sufficient to go into ballot for comment.
Thanks. Does anyone want to submit a motion for this to be included and to go into ballot?
If there's no discussion, I will
Yep.
motion that we approve these actor definitions.
Happy to second, Marika.
Thank you. I'll launch the poll. You should have the poll now, and if you can't vote, let's just drop your comment or your vote in the chat. Still some numbers coming through, but it's stabilizing now. We might give it another 5 seconds and we'll close this one. All right. So we have just go on the chat. So we have plus one from Danielle. So we have 21 affirmative and 4 abstain, which means the motion does pass. Thank you all. And thanks, Heath. Back to you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so now that we've defined our actors, what we are looking at doing is specifying what are the conformance rules for each of those actors. So for an AU PS producer, the conformance requirements are for you to comply with the requirements of the producer IPS actor. Remember that we said that it was based on the IPS producer actors, so we need to comply with those requirements and shall implement a UPS bundle, a UPS composition, and a UPS patient profiles. So as Danielle presented, a UPS bundle is our document. It has a mandatory composition and a mandatory patient profile inside that bundle. So that aligns with this particular dot point. It shall, for each mandatory section in the AUPS composition, implement the AUPS profiles referenced by that section. And we haven't gone through the composition yet. We'll do that next week. But the mandatory sections, for those that are aware, are allergies, problems, and medications. And in those 3 sections, we have these 4 profiles: AUPS, allergy intolerance, condition, AUPS condition, and we've got a choice of implementing either at least one of AUPS medication statement and AUPS medication request. So you can implement one or the other or both within that section. So that'll satisfy dot point 2. And you should, for each recommended section in AUPS composition, implement the profiles referenced by the section. And there's a number of recommended sections, and we'll go into that in next week. But today we're just addressing the main ideas of recommended sections. But some of the examples here are immunization, radiology results, and procedure history, and also device use. I don't have that on the example, but that is another section. And we also should, for each optional or undefined section, implement profiles referenced in the AUPS bundle. And Daniel sort of showed you some of those, for example, the observations and the pregnancy observations, the clinical impression. But if there isn't one, then what we are asking you to do is implement an AU core or an AU base profile where applicable. But that's only a should, that's a recommendation. We would rather you do that if there is an AUPS one. Sorry, an AU core or an AU base one. And hence some of our observation profiles, etc. And I think there's a couple. Finally, it's not finally, but on this particular slide at this point, you shall implement the AUPS producer obligations defined in the implemented profiles. So any of the profiles that you have implemented that we've talked above, you shall implement the producer obligations for them. And where an IPS profile is referenced, and can't remember, I think the IPS pregnancy is an example of that. In the bundle, the obligations of the producer IPS actor shall apply. So we fall back to the IPS obligations for those IPS profiles that we reference within the AUPS bundle. So we're talking about obligations here. And as I said, they're inherited from IPS. They're also inherited from AU Core. Sorry, that's wrong. We are not inheriting obligations from AU Core. We're inheriting obligations from IPS. We're inheriting must supports from AU Core, but we're not inheriting obligations. Some of those obligations, as per the principles we talked about earlier, are strengthened to suit the Australian context, and we'll go into those next week when we go through the composition. Just so you got a bit of context around what these obligations are, we talked about populate if known, and that's the one that we've been using in AU Core quite a lot. But some of the others that we're using in IPS, in particular, we're inheriting from IPS, are shall able to populate. So there's a few of our mandatory elements that we are actually saying, no, you cannot put a DAR on that. You cannot put data absent reason. So it is able to populate. So what does that mean compared to populate if known? So it shall be able to correctly populate this element, but under some conditions, you need to demonstrate that you have the ability to populate the element with a correct value. In other words, not use a data absent reason. Then there's shall populate. Now, shall populate, there is actually a hierarchy of these, and I talked about specialization of obligations earlier. Shall populate is actually a descendant of populate if known and able to populate. So it actually brings the meaning of those two together. And it has basically the context of shall include this element if the value is known and allowed to be shared. So you should know this element in your system, but hence you should or shall provide a value. And the only time you can't is when you're not allowed to share. Then there's a couple of other variants on this. And so we've got should populate, we've got should populate if known, and may able to populate. And there's a few combinations. And again, Daniel will probably go through those next meeting around where these are applied. In addition, and I'll go back to that principle earlier, where we're saying we're able to specialize an obligation or add another one. So in cases of things like where it's capable of, it's shall capable of, we can augment that with a should populate if known as an example. And we've got cases where for some reason IPS has stated that a particular element it may able to populate, even though it's a may. We don't normally specify things as a may, but in this particular case, they have called that out. So that's that previous dot point. That's what our obligations are. Is there any questions very briefly? Because that was pretty heavy going with those obligations. No? Okay. So we're nearly there on these conformance rules. We've just got a couple of extras that we're very familiar with, which is around suppressed data. So we shall implement the requirements on suppressed data when an element value is not allowed to be shared. And we shall implement the requirements on missing data when an element value is not known. And we shall implement the requirements on empty sections when information for a section is not known. So the prior two we're quite familiar with AE Core. They're pretty much the same rules. And we're not going to go into the details of what those requirements are today. We will do that another time, but it's more that the principles are that there are suppressed data, which is effectively the same as AE Core, so you are familiar with them. Missing data is, we actually just refer to missing data. And there is this new concept of empty sections. And we'll go into that further. And if you want, I'll come back to it later. So again, Is the intent of these conformance rules clear enough to go to public comment? And we're looking for wording corrections and things as part of ballot for comment. How do people feel about these conformance rules? Marvin's got a thumbs up. Thanks, Marvin.
I concur. I think it's a good idea to go, as you suggest.
Yeah, I think you've done a great job. It's a great job here. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So in that case, I will move that we approve these as the AUPS producer conformance rules.
And I'm happy to second that.
Who was the seconded? Just sorry for the record.
Sorry,
Michael
no, that's right,
Trahan.
Michael.
Yep, thank you. And I'll start the poll now. Okay, stabilize, so I'll give it another 5 seconds. All right, thank you everybody. I'll just read the results. So we have 23 affirmative and 3 abstain, which means the motion has passed. Thank you, Hip, and back to you.
Thank you. So now we move on to AUPS consumer conformance. And since we've gone through all the heavy work in the last session, in the last set, this should be pretty straightforward. So similarly, we shall implement as a consumer, the AUPS bundle composition and patient profiles. We shall, for each mandatory section in the AUPS composition, implement the AUPS profiles referenced by the entries, same set of profiles. Similarly, for each recommended section, we shall, all right? So previously this was a should. As a consumer, you shall implement the profiles referenced by the section entries. So you shall support AUPS immunization, radiology, procedure, and again, the device use statement is another example of that. And you shall implement the AUPS consumer obligations defined in the implemented profile, where an IPS profile is referenced. In the AUPS bundle, the obligations of the consumer IPS will apply. And you shall consume resources containing must support elements with empty sections, missing data, and suppressed data. Again, we're looking for your agreement that the intent of these rules are clear, so we can take these rules to public comment.
Sorry, Heath, can I ask what does it mean for a consumer to implement obligations? If they're just consuming it, I'm not sure I understand what implement means in this context.
So it really comes to that second to last dot point, which is around the obligations. So if you go back to what we were talking about before, that there is consumers have the obligations of handle and should display. All right, so you shall handle those particular profiles and you shall handle any of its must support elements and you should display those profiles and you should display those must support elements.
Okay, thank you.
If there's no other questions, I will propose a motion to accept these as the AUPS consumer conformance rules or the public comment.
Thanks. Do we have a second?
Marvin here. I'm happy to second.
Thank you. I'll launch the poll. No.
And as Danielle suggested that, you know, that again, these are on the wiki, so we can get your feedback. We'll review it next week. So there is on this page, basically that list there, so you can add inline comments or comments at the bottom. All right. Finally, what we've talked about here are things like missing data, empty sections, suppressed data, must support and obligations. And there is this general requirements page that we are drafting.
Sorry, Heath. Let me just close the motion. I think
sorry.
Yep. Sorry. Just going back to the previous, so you just too keen to steam ahead. Sorry about that. Look, I'll just read out the results. So the previous the motion that's just been raised. So we've had 20 affirmative and 2 abstain. So the motion is passed. So back to you, Heath. Sorry about that.
Hang on, let's add me. I was afraid I'd put it in the chat.
Plus Danielle. So we have 21 affirmative, and that includes Danielle, and 2 abstain. So the motion has passed. Thank you. And back to you.
Sorry, Ricardo, I was just aware of time. So this is my last slide. Basically, for some of the things that you want further information about, such as more details about the obligations and how they must support and suppressed and missing data and empty sections go. We've got a section around assertion statements of known absence of data in sections, etc. So we will not going to vote on this at the moment, but we're certainly taking your feedback. So please go off to this wiki page and have a look at it. And we will be reviewing this next Friday. It will be the main topic for next Friday for the review. Danielle?
No, that's exactly what I was going to say. So next Friday is that optional session for people who are interested in really crafting out the wording and everything on this proposal, to come along to that. But also those people who can't make it or can put some wording suggestions or other comments on there, and we'll have a look at that next Friday on how we can improve or where we might be missing things.
So I'm done. Thanks, Ricardo.
Thanks, Heath. So we now have Shelley, who's going to talk to us about the use cases. So over to you, Shelley.
Yep. Did you want me to do that, Danielle, or will I skip over to you guys and I'll save it for next week since we're running over time?
No, I think I don't know. No, I think it's fine. I think you can run through things.
Okay, fabulous. Yep, I will just share my screen. Apologies. I don't have the ability to share.
I'll do that for you. Shall I give you just a sec?
Thank you. Apologies.
That's all good. All right. Okay. Just let me know when you want me to change slides. Yep.
Yeah, and I'm just going to put some links in the chat as well. So yeah, last meeting we opened the AU Patient Summary use cases for review and feedback. So today I'll just give you a quick summary of some of the feedback that we received on the referral to specialist and allied health and the interstate GP use cases, and just outlining some of the updates that we've made or we've not made based on that input. So we got some really great detailed feedback from Nick McGee, which we've carefully reviewed. So we'll just walk through those key items. So Ricardo, if you don't mind clicking on that first link, if that's okay, and just share that. I was just going to talk to that rather than
Can you see it now?
If you can make it a smidge bigger, it might be good for those following along at home. How's that? Everyone happy with that? Yep.
Yep.
Lovely. So if we just start with the referral to specialist and allied health. So the first point of feedback was expiry of access to the patient summary. So Nick queried whether the embedded patient summary access should expire. So for example, in line with the referral duration of 6 to 12 months or upon completion of the episode of care. So the response we had for that was that we proposed not specifying this in the IG. Implementers are expected to manage the expiry aligned with their clinical workflows and their system design. However, we have noted that access should generally not extend beyond the referral validity. So we've decided to include a short note to that effect just for guidance for people. So if I move on to the second point, alerting for newer summaries. So the feedback suggested adding a mechanism to alert clinicians when a more recent patient summary is available. And our response to that was we agree that that's a useful addition. And while we don't prescribe the technical implementation, what we've done is we've updated the sequence diagram to illustrate a potential example, such as a background query to check for newer versions of when the patient summary is opened. And then the third point we've got there is support for different referral types. So Nick asked whether the use case is limited to e-referrals or if fax and paper referrals are supported. And our response for that one is that the primary flow assumes that it is an e-referral as per the consumer journey. However, we acknowledge that other formats can be supported provided that there's a link included. So for example, if you've got a QR code on a paper referral, and then it returns the encrypted patient summary that only the intended recipient can decrypt. And then the last point on that one was the referral platform or intermediary services. So there was a suggestion to include more detail on any required intermediary systems to handle patient summary storage and alerting. And our response for that one was that we've decided not to specify intermediary services as a requirement. However, we wanted to raise it with the group to confirm whether they think that it should be added as a precondition or left flexible for implementers. So I'll raise it with the group now, but we probably won't have a lot of time to discuss it. If you think it would be useful for implementers for us to specify an intermediary service as a precondition, or if you're happy for us to just leave that open. And you've got till the close of business today to get your feedback in for those as well. So
just to confirm, Shelley, you wanted people to indicate that by going Confluence, or should we have like a Zulip poll? Okay, no, Confluence.
Well, I just wasn't sure if we might not have time for a Zulip poll now. So yes, if you're happy, if guys, everyone wants to pop their feedback on the Confluence page, you've got until the end of today for that one. And then if we can go to the next one, Ricardo, that's for the interstate GP visit, please. Thank you. And yeah, the first point on that one, so Nick noted that the term Smart Health Link might be unclear to some implementers. So as a response, we've decided to add a link to the Smart Health Link specification. And we've also included a brief explanation and noted the current status of Smart Health Links in the IG. The next point was clarifying disclaimer and illustrative nature of use cases. So there was a call to make it more obvious that use case diagrams and flows are illustrative and not implementation mandates, which we agreed with. So what we've done is we've included a persistent disclaimer at the bottom of both use case pages, just to make it clear that this is an illustrative approach and it's not a mandated HL7AU standard. And then the next point there was include the Smart Health Link server or equivalent intermediary. And we agreed with that and we've added that to the use case. And then the last point there, clarifying how the summary is accessed. So how the QR code's scanned. Nick queried the usability aspect. So how's the summary accessed in practice using a QR code? And we believe that the current wording is sufficient. The SIS is described, or SIS Clinical Information System, it's described as being Smart Health Link capable, and it's implied that scanning, whether that be via webcam, handheld scanner, or inbuilt system functionality is supported. But we've also clarified this slightly in the preconditions. So that's the current feedback we've got. So just a reminder, feedback deadline is the close of business today. So if anyone does have any additional thoughts, now's the time to share them. But noting that you'll also still be able to comment during ballot. So it's not the end of the road. But yeah, just if there any early feedback you'd like to put in before ballot, if you can get it in by the close of business today, that would be wonderful.
Thanks, Shelley. Look, we're almost out of time, but again, just a quick reminder on the dates we're working towards and this will be available in the presentation that will be shared. So our next meeting will be in the new financial year on the 11th of July, and this is the proposed agenda. So if anyone wants to make any suggestions for items to be added to the agenda, just please reach out and let us know. And I think that's everything from us today. So thank you very much for your time, and yeah, I look forward to seeing you again in the new financial year.
Thanks, Ricardo.
Thank you all.
Thanks all.
Thanks, Ricardo.
Thanks, Ricardo. Great job
Thanks, Ricardo.
sharing.